Here it goes. Hey there, aspiring horror authors. It's another episode of Sako and the Moon, created by two self-published horror authors. Today we are diving into the psychology of fear. I'm Sako Toomey, artist and author, a bunch of other things, but we'll just mention that I'm a self-published author 3 times over. I've been working on my craft for decades, and now I'd like to share my skills with you guys.
And I am Dewan L. Hearn, more affectionately known as the Moon, and I am the doer of things. I'm a published author, I'm a podcaster, filmmaker, screenwriter, doer of things.
Doer of things. Well said. So the psychology of fear is a fascinating field that explores the underlying mechanisms of what scares us and why. Fear is a complex emotional response that is essential for survival, helping us to recognize and respond to danger. And today we're going to talk about the key aspects of the psychology of fear.
Which is not as complex as you think it is.
Like well, I don't know. My research said otherwise. Let's see. Biological basis of fear. The brain's role is the amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure in the brain, plays a central part in the processing of fear. It is responsible for detecting threats and activating the body's fight or flight response. The physiological response is when faced with a threat, the body undergoes several physiological changes, such as increased heart rate, rapid breathing, and the release of stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. These changes prepare the body to either confront or flee from the danger.
Yep. The increased heart rate, the increased breathing rate, that gets your body, like, that feeds your brain, feeds your muscles, feeds all your cells, so that if you have to run, you can run. You can run a little bit further than you normally would. You can fight, you're a little bit stronger. Kind of like that whole mom thing when the kid's underneath the dresser, and the dresser's otherwise takes like 3 people to carry, but she somehow goes one arm to do the thing and grabs the kid with the other, and she's somehow strong enough to suddenly do that. She didn't get
adrenaline.
That was adrenaline.
That was adrenaline. Yeah, the old grandma lifts a car to save the child, sort of.
Well, that's real stuff, though. Like, it happened to my mom. My brother, like, she had a dresser in her room, and my brother was climbing the dresser, and it fell over. Weight on the front of it, it fell over, and my mom grabbed the whole tall dresser, lifted the dresser, grabbed my brother from underneath, and then was able to put it back. Yeah, like, that's real shit.
Wow.
Like, there's jokes about it, but those jokes are based on real shit. Like, that's really what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to my mom and brother.
Oh, wow. My adrenaline, yes, has made me stronger in the past. Yes. I need to do something about the Discord. Hold on.
Live broadcast.
Live broadcast.
I'm trying to tell people, man, this is the best part. Like, I have just recently remembered that I did a radio show in 2023, and that's the best part of doing stuff live, is that shit happens. Like, your phone rings, or someone knocks on the door, or your pizza gets delivered, so you have to go run downstairs and grab it, because they won't come up to the hotel room. Anything can happen on a live broadcast.
Yes, absolutely. And that happened. Okay, so the the, the brain's role, the amygdala detects, danger things. And then the physiological responses to the amygdala doing that stuff is the heart rate, the rapid breathing, the increased adrenaline and cortisol.
Yeah.
All right, so evolutionary perspective, survival mechanism.
Yep.
Fear is an evolutionary adaptation that has helped humans and other animals survive by avoiding harmful situations. It prompts quick reactions to potential threats, enhancing the chances of survival. Yeah.
Do you have examples of those?
Uh, my In my past, uh, I have lacked the fear in as far as like figuring fight or flight.
Well, yeah,
So,
those are more societal conditionings, which is a whole different thing I want to get into before the episode ends. But it's like you mentioned evolutionary aspects. I mean, it's little things like so. Okay, you have to just keep in mind that evolutionarily, we're looking at how to keep the species alive. Individual by individual, how to keep the species alive. So it's little things like being able to have like peripheral vision, looking to see straight ahead, seeing things in color, um, tasting things that are bitter or taste sour, or having the sense of smell to smell things that are offensive, things like that. Like the reason why certain things um, that we react to them a certain way, like, oh, that stinks. It's not just because it stinks, it's because somewhere in the evolutionary past, those types of smells were the signs of threats. I was recently reading about like a fungus that can, that, it makes cat urine less appalling. Sounds like a weird flex for a fungus, and you're like, why is that a big deal? Actually, I have a bunch of cats, so that might not be so bad. Well, when you're a mouse, and that's what you would normally use to avoid a potential threat,
mhm.
then that's a danger, and that's one of the effects of that fungus. I bring all that up just because evolutionarily we are to avoid things that can harm us. As horror writers, that's kind of what we're doing. We're putting our characters in harm's way. So evolutionarily, looking at how fear impacts, we're here to avoid the things that would otherwise uh, go get us in the night.
Indeed. Dante Erics and Ginny Noble are in the chat, which is
What's up,
like
everybody?
super rad. My mom didn't use superhuman strength to ever save me, but plenty to whip my ass, though.
I mean, she was trying to save you from yourself, maybe.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
my parents' excuse, I'm sure. They're just trying to save us from ourselves, but not from therapy bills. It's whatever.
yeah. Oh, excuse me. Innate fears, such as fear of heights or snakes, are considered innate and have likely developed because they pose significant threats to our ancestors or, like actual events in their lives.
So they're either weird or they're responses to trauma. If you
Mm-hmm.
were trying to, if you almost drowned once in the lake, then you're probably not going to hang out in big bodies of water um, ever. If you fell out of a
Ever.
tree, maybe you're not going to climb ladders. This innate fear of heights. It's those kinds of things. Fear of
Those kinds of
clowns, fear of pickles. I don't completely understand those fears. Whole
A whole generation became afraid of clowns because of it.
a whole generation became afraid of being behind like lumber trucks on the road because
Yes.
of Final Destination.
Yes. Absolutely.
Kiss my ass if you think I'm gonna be behind that truck. No, no.
All right. Uh, learned fears.
That's a learned fear.
Yes. Classical conditioning. Fear can be learned through classical conditioning, where an initially toy. Let me try that again.
One more time.
Where an initially neutral stimulus becomes associated with a frightening event. For example, if a person experiences a traumatic event in a particular location, they may develop a fear of that place. Speaking from experience, that is, yes, that is true.
Yeah, nothing extra. I had nothing extra to add to that.
I had a traumatic incident in the woods, and then I avoided the woods at all costs.
There's also There's also like food aversions, which I guess can also um, fit in that category. I learned in psychology class. Let's say you're eating spaghetti while you know on the airplane and the airplane has severe turbulence. Part of your brain is like, well, if I eat spaghetti, the plane will crash. So I'm not going to eat spaghetti on an airplane ever again. That weird kind of
The
food aversion.
scarier the clown, the cooler they are. Yes.
I mean, remember talk about clowns real quick. Side note, we're sidebar here for a second. I'm holding the show. So remember the clown epidemic when all of a sudden there was clowns threatening everybody all over the fucking place? Do
No,
y'all remember this?
I missed that.
Does anyone else in the comments watching the show? Does anyone remember this when there was like this 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 thing where out of nowhere people were in real life people were dressing up as clowns and like terrorizing neighborhoods. Thank you, Jenny. Like, yeah, it was happened in our neighborhood. My wife was going to go visit her parents. As she turned the corner into the back of the neighborhood towards the house, there was a dude distinctly, I think he had like a bat or like an axe or something, dressed up as a
Oh,
fucking clown. So one of the other dudes in the neighborhood whooped his ass because that's some dumb shit to do.
that is some dumb shit to do.
Don't do
Uh,
dumb shit like that. But no, it was a really
now I
weird
feel
thing.
the need to look it up. Like,
Oh, it was a whole thing. Like,
I vaguely remember seeing videos of it.
yeah, they were just like Jenny said, they would just stand on the side of the road and look intimidating, and it'd be one of those kind of fortuitous kind of like if you go any further than this, there might be more of us kind of like weird ass shit. And it was a thing. It was a whole ass thing. Yeah, it went on for several months. This is it was. I have no idea how you don't know this.
Well, I mean, like I said, I saw videos, but like,
This was
uh,
a thing. It was a whole thing.
it,
Like
it did not
it,
happen in my neighborhood.
what this was, it falls into a point that I'm sure I'll find a better place to put it than here. It falls into a category of where you have you don't anticipate this happening. It goes against your expectation. You don't expect to drive down the road and see a random ass clown holding a baseball bat on the corner of by your house, by your grandparents' house, whatever. You don't expect to see that, but something out of the ordinary, something abnormal. I was trying to say both of those at the same time. That's what creates fear. It's something that goes against the norm, goes against expectations. Um, Again, I have a couple of examples, but I'll probably have a better place to put them in the episode. If not, I'll just shoehorn it at the end.
Oh, okay. Uh,
Because I'm
the
assuming that we're
other,
going to get into a point about writing and how to apply this into our works.
yeah,
That's
oh
where it goes.
yes, we'll definitely talk about how to apply it to writing for
Yeah,
sure.
that's where these examples belong there. So we'll get there here soon.
Oh, okay.
Now,
Uh, social learning. Fear can also be acquired through social learning by observing others. For instance, children can develop fears by watching their parents' reactions to certain stimuli.
yeah, there are also, I don't know if you have a separate category for this, but there's also cultural learnings where
Hmm.
we've learned that historically group A doesn't like group B, and so group B learns to avoid people in group A, or at least they become very leery of them. The trust is harder to establish, and there's going to probably be a group A, group B that automatically pops into people's heads. But do understand there are more than just one or two group A's out there, um,
Mhm.
and everybody falls into the category of group A. Like, believe it or not, regardless of where you sit on a totem pole or societally, or whatever label you may have given yourself or been given, you fall into a group A in some degree to someone. Be mindful of those things in humor. But again, the point of that is we learned to, or were taught to, be fearful of certain things for reasons, and that can really hold deep. Like, that can really
Yes.
not tight.
And sometimes it doesn't really take. Like, when I was a child, my mother was ironing, and I was like prancing around and running in circles around my mother. And she's like, "Hey, don't play around the ironing board. The iron is hot." And
It's
I was
hot on
like,
the bottom.
"Hot, hot, 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 hot." And she's
Bet
like,
you
"I
learned then.
told you it was hot."
You learned
So
then,
I
didn't
hated
you?
my mother after that.
Well, there's that viral video where it's like someone's trying, like a mom's trying to hand their kid like a pot or something, and like she's holding it like this, and the kid's going like this to grab it, and the mom pulls it back and is like, no, it's hot on the bottom. So she goes to hand it to him again. The kid does this again, like, it's hot on the bottom, and then it goes to do it again. They go like, it's hot on the bottom, and then I don't remember the kid burns himself or not, but the viral part, the sound of the mom going, it's hot on the bottom. And
It's hot.
every parent has done that. They're like, don't touch that part, it's sharp. Don't touch that thing, it's hot. Don't touch that part, it's cold. Don't grab that, it's heavy. Don't
Yeah.
run here, you'll fall. And then kids are just like,
Don't
choo choo
climb the
choo.
furniture. Yeah, you'll crack your head open.
And I just, after a while, after about like 3 or 4 times, I just look at my kid. I'm like, all right, get your shoes on. We're going to ER soon. Hold on. All
Correct.
right, now we're going. Here we go.
Here we go. Yeah. Cognitive factors. Perception of control. The degree of control one feels over a situation can influence fear levels. Situations perceived as uncontrollable are typically more frightening.
Yeah. And that's where we're starting to get into the really good stuff. Because when you're looking at the controllables versus your uncontrollables, you probably have trust issues stemming from somewhere else. And so you have then learned to, if you don't have control over it, then things can go wrong. And
Mhm.
ultimately, it boils down to the what can go wrong that creates the fear. So you go work towards that fight or flight kind of mentality, where instead of fight or flight is, how do I intentionally prevent negatives from happening? How do I avoid the problems? And understanding all of these things is really good for setting up characters. We gotta get back to how it applies to the office.
Yeah.
All of this is how you set your characters up to encounter the impending fear of your horde hail.
Mhm.
If someone has experienced homelessness for some reason, right, in the lore of the story, then not having control, like being at someone else's house, you're still staying there, you're still homeless or whatever. Now you fear upsetting the person who's letting you stay there. You fear doing something wrong, using up the last bit of toilet paper, because the last thing you want to do is, rock the boat and risk being homeless again. Sometimes those things can be, it may not seem very daunting while you're sitting in your own house, but when you're not sitting in your house, those kind of things are really daunting. Those genuine fears. It kind of depends on the nature and the direction that your story's going, but that's just a really low key example of how you can create tension, how you can create anxiety for a character. And all of those things will eventually play into fear.
And anticipatory fear, which is exactly what you were talking about. The fear of potential future threats can be as intense as fear of immediate danger. The
Almost greater.
anticipatory fear is often linked to anxiety disorders.
And honestly, those things, like I said, could be even greater than the immediate threat. If someone is in front of me trying to cause me harm, I know exactly what this threat is. It's clear as day right in front of me. I can see if there's a weapon in their hand. I can see if they're bigger or stronger. I can see if there's more threats than, there's more people than just me. But when I can't see the problem yet, or I don't know what the actual fear problem issue will be, I've now created a worst case scenario in my head and probably 10 or 12 of them. And now I have 10 or 12 possible things that can cause me harm or that I can be fearful of versus the actual one thing in front of me in a real life situation, like an immediate situation like that. So
Absolutely.
sometimes that can be where you set the seeds for fear. The what ifs, the big old what ifs.
What if? And speaking of what if, my tactic for getting over word block was, what is the worst possible thing that can happen to this character in this moment? And that usually, like, propels the character into reaction time.
Yeah.
Right. So, and the same could be said about, like, people in general.
Yeah. I get a lot of my, Jenny mentions anxiety. I'm incredibly paranoid. So whenever I go through any kind of situation, I'm always thinking about the what ifs. Sure, I turned right on the road and that leads me to my next destination, but what if all of a sudden that road is blocked and I have to go left? I've never been down that road before. So I don't know what I'm anticipating. I don't know what to anticipate. I don't know what to expect. And that unknown is where a lot of fear comes from.
Right.
Uh, I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, whenever they're scared of something, I'm like, your fear comes from the unknown. It's from what you don't know about. It's like whatever you aren't aware of, that's what's creating your fear. So learn as much as you can about a thing that you're doing, a place that you're going, the people you're going with. And the more you know for certain, the less anxiety, place for anxiety, the less, uh, the fewer unknown factors. I'm boring, Sako. Um,
No, I'm just so tired. I'm sorry.
okay, so side note, she literally just got back to the house before we went on here.
I walked in the door and I sent a link.
Yeah, like so she genuinely is tired, but I want to pick on her because I can.
Yeah.
So she literally like just raced from her sisters and hopped on at like 1:56 for the show.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm not that
so
boring. I really am. Really not.
have yeah, he's not that boring. Okay, so overthinking a situation can make it worse because of anxiety of not knowing.
Right.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's just ultimately what it is. It's
What if, what if, what if, what if, what if, what if?
and it can be something very, very simple. I was thinking about this earlier. It's like imagine if you left the house for work, right? Everything's fine, everything's normal. What do you expect when you get back home? You expect the house to be just like you left it, at the very least. So if you left and locked the door, you had like a little statue on the front porch, and there's a little thing hanging in your window when you left for work. You come back, and that thing is no longer in the window. The little thing is broken at the front door, and your door's unlocked. Things are no longer the way they were. You're no longer expecting this. You weren't expecting this. So now we're like, okay, what's on the other side of this door? Is there the threat still present? Is the threat, what did they do to the house? Um, is someone else in the house? Was my spouse home? Are they harmed? Was my mother harmed? Was my kids harmed? The dog harmed? No dogs were harmed in this example. Um, but those are the kind of anxiety ridden uh, type of things that you can easily add into any story, any piece of work, and create tension, create anxiety, and establish something for your character to be afraid of.
Absolutely. Well said. Uh, we talked a little bit about cultural influences.
But
Cultural background can shape what individuals fear. Some fears are more prevalent in certain cultures due to shared beliefs, myths, or societal norms. And
yeah,
then, uh, so Baba Yaga, for instance, is
not
like
John Wick,
a boogeyman,
not John Wick.
basically set up in Europe, right? And Eastern Europe, Russia, you know, and she teaches lessons that uh, will basically scare you into being good.
Yeah,
Oh, superstitions in different cultures. Yeah, absolutely.
and in Western culture, that's Satan slash hell for Christian society. It's like, don't do this thing in fear of going to hell. Don't do this thing in fear of not going to heaven, or something. And don't fight the kid at school, or you fear detention, or whatever
Or
it is.
whatever. Yeah.
It's that same basic thing. It's like, we're going to tell you there's something set up so that this creates the fear, the superstitions, the legends, the lore, you know, and it's like, if you do what we don't want you to do, this entity will get you, or this good entity won't get you. It's like the Santa Claus versus Krampus kind of thing.
Yes. Yes.
So it's like, hey, be a good kid, or Santa's not coming, or be a good kid, or Krampus is.
Yeah.
So there's no negative
And he's
Easter
gonna
bunny.
shove you in a sack, and he's gonna. Yeah. Exactly.
Beat you into a tree. Why don't we have like a negative or an anti-Easter bunny? We need like an anti-Easter bunny. That's what I
So
want.
fear of egregores, like that's a thought, right? So that's a thought I'm gonna have to give more thinking to. So exposure to frightening media such as horror movies or news reports can influence what people fear. Media can amplify fears by portraying exaggerated threats.
And it's not just exaggerated threats per se, but if every threat you identify looks a certain way or sounds a certain way, then societally that is the bad guy. You see
Mhm.
this in some medias when people are like, why is the bad guy slash thief slash home invader always look like this? And when that becomes the norm, then people start to believe, well, the only time I see people who look like that are bad guys. So those people must be bad guys. Like the shirt said, everything comes back to wrestling. In wrestling, we always have this myth of the foreign heel, right? So it's one of those things where if the guy is Russian, if the guy is Iranian, like the Iron Sheik or Rusev, not too long ago,
Yeah.
like these characters are always viewed to be the bad guys. They're always the heels. And if you're a smart, a genuinely intelligent thinker, you're like, okay, they're playing a role, they're taking advantage of a stereotype. that's fine. But if you're not, and you're more impressionable, then these can translate into real life fears of people who look like this, or people who do this job, or people who live in that part of town, or people who act like this, or the people who talk like that. Can all fall into those things of real life fears that impact real people. Don't be idiots.
Yeah, don't be idiots.
Remember,
Yeah.
everybody fits into somebody's group A. When I say that group A and group B has learned to fear group A, everybody falls into somebody's group A. Just remember that. So don't sit there and get worried about who's around. Remember, somebody's worried about you too. Chill out. Calm down. Remote pause.
Psychological disorders related to fear. Phobias,
Yeah.
right? So specific phobias are intense, irrational, keyword irrational, fears of particular objects or situations. Common phobias include arachnophobia, fear of spiders, and claustrophobia, fear of confined spaces.
Yeah.
And then you got anxiety disorders as well.
Yeah, there's some logical phobias. Fear of tight spaces. We've talked about The Descent recently, and one of the best parts cinematically about that movie was how they create those tight spaces, which gives you that sense of anxiety when you're watching it, and the fear of getting stuck. As Above, So Below, another really good movie where they're crawling into small spaces, and there's a scene where I think his name was Ben. He's like the camera guy. He's going through a tight space. He's kind of a bigger dude, and he gets stuck. The moment he is stuck, the panic is instant, and that just creates the situation more for him. It creates tension. It creates anxiety. And when you're creating your art, whether it's story form or short film or filmmaking form, whether it's on written or visual media, it's that tension you want to try to create. Your goal is to create tension, some sort of tension. Heighten the anxiety of your characters. Isolate their situation where all we can focus on is this negative piece right here. Like we're all stuck focusing on the one dude who's stuck in the rock. He's a mile underground and he's stuck in this pack, and everyone else is trying to get him free, and he feels like he can't breathe. All of a sudden, it's great stuff, and that is what you're aiming for. Those types of situations that you can recreate in those moments. Claustrophobia, real thing. Arachnophobia, there are poisonous spiders out there. That fucked me up. I don't mind them like that, but that would mess with me. Now, fear of balloons, it's a thing. Doesn't make sense to me. But
I fear the popping of the balloon. The anticipatory fear of the balloon popping is enough for me.
I'm totally buying you a Jack in the Box. Do.
Screw you.
But then there's like triskaidekaphobia, where it's just a fear of the number 13. Just the number 13 by itself. If it's the 13th of the month, if it's the 13th room, most of your buildings that are at least 13, 14 feet high don't have a 13th floor. This is a real life example of that. And it throws people off all the time. Like, why don't we have a 13th floor? Because people are scared of it. Movies like 1408, they go all over. They're talking about 1408 was a movie where the haunted room was on the 14th floor, where there was no 13th floor, so it was on the 13th floor. So yeah, these things are everywhere, and I'm trying to show examples where people have used these irrational fears into their medias, because that's what we're talking about.
Because that's what we're talking about. Generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, and social anxiety disorder are conditions where fear and anxiety are predominant and pervasive, often interfering with daily life. Uh, Copycat, I think, was another good one. In the Sigourney, was it Sigourney Weaver? I think it
Fancy.
was.
We'll go with
Uh,
it.
so she's a claustrophobe,
Okay.
right? And she is afraid of um, the her anxiety is so high that the fear of being assaulted in her house or assaulted outside of her house is so high that it has breached anxiety and gone into phobia.
Yeah.
And uh, I, I think it's a good movie. I recommend at least one watch of Copycat.
For all horror movies, I will always recommend 2 watches for every horror movie. That should be your automatic standard in watching horror. If you're watching horror, you need to watch a movie and watch it twice. But it's also that'd be a good plot tool. Like imagine if you have an irrational fear, and like having social anxiety or anything like that, and you put your person into a situation where they have to now go into that situation. Now
Right.
they're feeling all the anxiety, but there is no threat. Now add a threat to it. Now add a threat to it. Not only do they feel a threat, internally they're dealing with something, but now externally there's an actual threat. And I love any horror movie that does that dichotomy where there is an internal struggle. If you have a group, then there's a struggle in the group. There's like a married couple, they have a fight that they're dealing with. And then on top of that, there's an external struggle, the actual entity or issue that they're trying to combat. I love when there's both going on at the same
Yeah. The So Jenny's social anxiety ended up turning into agoraphobia at one time, and it took a lot to change her mindset. Yeah,
Those are
yeah.
real things. Anxiety.
I'm slowly overcoming my claustrophobia. I can now be in elevators
That's a real thing, man. Um, Dan
without
Brown wrote.
mirrors.
Dan Brown writes the Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, and he created the main character of Robert Langdon. Robert Langdon
Hmm.
has, every superhero has to have a kryptonite, right? He's claustrophobic.
Hmm.
So being in elevators, I think if it's in the Da Vinci, the Louvre, yeah, it's in the Da Vinci Code where Robert Langdon's brought in as an expert, so he's told, but he's really a suspect. And when he's really anxious about getting on the elevator to go to where the crime scene is, the investigator interprets that anxiety as, oh, he's returning to the scene of the crime. He's nervous about it. He feels like he's about to get caught. That's reinforcing this idea that Robert Langdon's actually guilty. When all it is his claustrophobia, and he can't be in an elevator. That does play a part in most of the stories that he's featured in. Great books, by the way. Great books.
So, how about coping mechanisms?
Throw those in there. Before we go into coping mechanisms, it's
You had
important
one
for us.
you wanted to mention, yeah.
Well, no, I've mentioned most of what I want to talk about, but it's important if we're going to talk about real life people dealing with coping mechanisms for real life struggles. I feel like it's our responsibility to emphasize how real life that shit really is. People don't always they're like the invisible illnesses. You're not going to always see anxiety on a person's skin, or so understand that if someone close to you or important to you, or just anybody in general says, hey, I have this thing where I can't go into crowds, or I'd love to go to that concert with you, but can we find an isolated spot? Listen to them, believe them, just trust that it's something that they don't. You might think it's silly. Part of them thinks it's silly too, but they can't do anything about it. I had a job where I had such crippling anxiety to work on, to do the task, that I was stuck in my car. And I'm sitting here yelling at myself in my head, Juan, open the car door. Juan, open the car door. Like, just step out of your car. It's okay if the person says no, it's fine. You'll just get back in the car and carry on. But I literally, physically could not get myself to move. And eventually I went to therapy for it and I kind of dealt with it then. But it was an isolated kind of circumstance, but it's absolutely real. And it's just important before we go into the topics on how real people are dealing with it, we have to really emphasize that these are real things. So if you hear about it or you see it in some sort of media, take a time, read about it, learn about it, understand it, ask questions if you have to. That shit's real. So don't harass people about it. Now we can talk about coping mechanisms.
Okay, now we can talk about coping mechanisms.
It was important. That was important.
Exposure therapy. Gradual exposure to the feared object or situation in a controlled environment can help reduce fear responses over time. The more often I was in an elevator, the less I was afraid of it.
Yeah.
Same with stage fright. Like,
Because
the
you're faced
more
with the fear and you realize that there is no threat that comes to it. You get on at floor number 1, you get off at floor number 5, everything was fine. And then the more you do it, the better at it you're.
yeah. CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. There we go. CBT helps individuals identify and challenge disordered thought patterns that contribute to their fear and develop healthier coping mechanisms. Basically, when you're in the throes of, like, say, a panic attack, you can kind of check in with yourself and see where the panic level is at. And you can kind of like try to recontextualize the fear or the anxiety in a way that will, give you, it'll also give you exercises to kind of like calm yourself. The mindfulness and relaxation techniques. Yeah. Practices such as mindfulness meditation, deep breathing, and progressive muscle reenactment. Oh my God. Progressive muscle relaxation can help manage fear and anxiety by promoting a state of calm.
Yep.
Oh, I missed out on great jobs because I couldn't get out of the car to do the interview.
That's a real thing. It's a real thing, man.
And she uses Mollabees to help focus during a panic attack. Counting each beat helps a lot. Yeah.
Sometimes it just takes something to like focus your thoughts and like you do with the beads, just focus your thoughts, focus your energies, take your mind off the fear. I I I started doing this thing where like I knew I'm going to panic about something, and so I just gave myself space to do it. I'm like, okay, between now and the time to this point, panic all day. Feel all the panic, all the worry. You're gonna do it anyway, so just do it. And then I told myself to just walk up to the door and take a deep breath and say, "Fuck it," and then just walk to the door anyway. Is that easy? No. Sometimes you gotta turn around, take 3 steps back, 3 steps forward again, take another deep breath, and try it a second time. But sometimes it's just one of those things where it's like you have to put yourself into a mindset again, like Sako had mentioned, change your frame of mind and be like, listen, there's a point in time where once I hit the button, I can't take it back, essentially. So force yourself to just hit the button and then like walk in that room, walk in that door, step out of the car. That is not fucking easy.
No.
But it works for some, doesn't work for others. That's what works for me. Sometimes you just gotta like forcibly push the button and then just let whatever happens happens. You gotta like kind of just ride that wave.
Ride that wave. Understanding the psychology of fear Hui. Understanding the psychology of fear involves examining the interplay between biological, psychological, and social factors. This knowledge can be applied to better manage fear and anxiety, improve mental health, and enhance overall well-being. And also, now that you can write what you know.
Yeah. And this will open doors to so many resources. As you're dealing with your own struggle, there might be 5 struggles in a book and you only deal with one of them. You still got the book that features the other 4.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to group therapy. You've now met other people. A lot of the people always tell you, write what you know. Well, I don't know everything, but I don't want to like hinder myself as a creative either. So you meet people who know the other things.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you might be in group. Don't go to group therapy and just focus on what you've got to say. Listen to all the people. They're all going to tell you a story, and you can draw from all of those stories. You can realize what was it in their life story that created the anxiety, that led to the fear, that created the phobia. What was the situation like? Recreate that. Change names, change locations, and then just use what you've learned, because now, like Sako said, now you know something else besides your own experience. Talk to your therapist. I think everybody should have a therapist. I just think that everybody should. Like everyone has a dentist and everyone has a physician. Everyone should have a therapist. That's
And they
just,
should all talk to each other.
they should be able to talk to each other, and they should all just help. Maybe not your dentist, maybe your
Maybe
psychologist,
not your dentist,
right?
but
But your
some,
doctor, but your doctor,
depending
your
on what
therapist.
has happened at your dentist, like
You might have to
like
go to your
things I have
therapist
been
because of your dentist.
prescribed or surgeries I've like been under or
It
whatever.
might be because of your dentist that you still need a therapist. I'm just saying. It's a thing. But realistically, like these are all of this understanding and trying to figure out fears not only will help you, because I don't know a creative that doesn't deal with some sort of mental struggle. I don't know one. I know a lot of creatives. So not only does that help you, but that helps you understand your contemporaries and your associates, and also it gives you the experience and the know-how, the factors to have a complete character, right? Not everyone is going to be the super happy, smiley person who's super smart and does everything super great. Every superhero's got kryptonite, They got to have something that works against them. Some phobia that's going to come into play later on in the story, some issue, some hang up, some scenario they've dealt with, and all of this understanding of fear. Because let's be honest, that's what horror is about. Horror is about dealing and coping and utilization, more so the experience of fear. In some way, shape, or form, it's the experience of fear. You know, is this going to happen to me because it happened to my mom? Why did this happen to my brother? Or why are these 2 girls knocking on my door in the middle of the night? That was from Knock Knock, not some kind of weird.
Oh, okay.
That was from Knock Knock. But again, it's Keanu Reeves, he's home by himself, and then all of a sudden, knock, 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 these 2 young ladies in the middle of a rainstorm show up on his door. He's trying to be nice. He's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to be cautious, and it doesn't work exactly in his favor. He fears, like, he makes a couple mistakes, blonde and brunette, and when his wife gets back, he has that underlining fear. Well, what happens if she finds out and these girls start coming around again? It's those kinds of things. Simple, easy. These are all the scenarios that can easily just be uh, introduced into your story. They just released the remake of The Strangers, which is a movie from 2003 that I absolutely love,
Oh yeah.
because the only thing that people did wrong was answer the door. Why are you doing this? Because you were home. And that was the only thing that they did wrong. They were home. Was it? When you watched the old Strangers, that was it. That was all that happened. It was someone knocked on the door and they answered. And that was what they did wrong. And the terror, like that was like intentionally terrorizing. So
Mm.
with this episode, if I was going to suggest a movie, I suggest the original The Strangers. You can go, it's still in theaters now, The Strangers Chapter 1. It's like the remake. They're going to do like a part 1, 2, and 3. Well, go watch the first one with Liv Tyler in it. That is a great movie if you want to slow build tension, anxiety, and fear without the need of special equipment, without the need of like supernatural elements and things like that. There are no ghosts, there are no supernatural elements. No one has special powers. There's not like a magical amulet or nothing like that. It's just three folks who picked a house and just started fucking with them.
Yeah. Well done. Well done. If you like this video at any point, I encourage you to hit the like button. And if you want to see more episodes like this one, then you can catch us on Fridays at 2 p.m. every week. And if you don't catch our lives, you can always watch it in post. It'll be around. And you might want to subscribe and maybe even ring that bell on the off chance that YouTube actually notifies you when we go live, and we will catch you on the flip side.